Welcome to another Rural Realities podcast, presented by the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection.
Welcome to Rural Realities, the podcast where we talk honestly about the challenges facing farm families and rural communities and share tools and resources to help them navigate. I'm your host, Karen Endres, Farmer Wellness Program Coordinator at the Wisconsin Farm Center at the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. I've spent over 30 years working in Wisconsin agriculture, and as a farm owner and a communications professional, but I'm also a mom, a coach, and an advocate for wellness for our farm families and rural communities. As we approach May's Mental Health Month, I want to start our series by introducing you to someone that I believe genuinely cares about what happens on your farm. Not just your yield, not just your bottom line, but you, the farmer. Randy Romanski is the secretary at the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection, and he's been one of the most consistent champions for farmer mental health in our state. Under his leadership with Governor Evers and the support of the Wisconsin State Legislature, he has built something real, the Farmer Wellness Program. Free counseling, 24/7 line, online support group, all for farmers and their families, and resources that are actually reaching people. In 2025 alone, over 500 counseling sessions for farmers and their families were supported by this program. The online support group attendance grew by nearly 50%. Those aren't just numbers, those are your neighbors. Today, Secretary Romanski and I are going to talk about why the state stepped up, what's available to you right now, and why asking for help is one of the strongest things a Wisconsin farmer can do. So to kick it off, first of all, welcome, Secretary Romanski, and do you mind if I call you Randy?
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free.
Great. Thank you so much for doing this and for having me here today. We are so excited to hear about your role at DATCP, because in our agency and in the industry, that's what everybody knows us by, is our acronym. So can't wait to hear about your role and how this Farmer Wellness Program really began and what it offers Wisconsin farmers and their families. So let's just start with a little personal, professional background. How long have you been at DATCP and in this role?
First of all, Karen, thanks for the very kind introduction. I appreciate it. And thank you for all of your hard work on this program and so many other things in the industry. It's really great to hear you talk about the things that have been developed, and you've been the muscle behind a lot of those things. So I wanted to make sure to acknowledge that.
Thank you.
A little bit about my background for those who don't know it. I've worked for the state of Wisconsin for 35 years now, and during that 35 years, I've worked in and around agriculture, including about actually a little more than 10 years here at the department at DATCP. And I've have the opportunity to be secretary twice for this agency. And for those who don't know it, this is an agency that has the opportunity to touch people's lives every day. We all are consumers. We all go to the gas station, and those are all things that our agency touches. But we have a really close connection to the world of agriculture, obviously, and it's just great to work with such a dedicated group of people here who serve as a resource to farmers, agribusinesses, and consumers.
That's awesome. And in your time here, the Farmer Wellness Program, as it looks today, was created. What made farmer mental health such a priority at DATCP?
Well, for those who don't know it, the Farm Center has been around since the mid-'80s, and it's provided a variety of services, everything from financial consulting to transition planning to whole herd diagnostics and farmer wellness. And so wellness has always been a component of the Farm Center, but really, as we've evolved, it's just we've gravitated to realizing that we want to work with the industry, but that means we want to work with people, and we want to be a resource to the people that are the foundation of Wisconsin's agriculture industry. Farmers are the foundation. It's a $116.3 billion industry, and there are a lot fewer people doing the work of feeding us all than there were 10, 20, 30 years ago. And that can be a lot of stress, even in the good times. And so the Farm Center is just such a unique resource to the industry, and this is the human component of what the Farm Center can do. So farmer wellness was kind of built off of that, and it's such an important investment in people, in our neighbors. I think you used that word when we first started off. Farmers are not only feeding us as their neighbors, they're feeding the world, and we should make sure that we are taking care of each other.
That's incredible, and I think you hit on some really good points that the Farm Center, as part of DATCP, is really here and was really created to support farmers and their families. So this was kind of a natural evolution as farm stress really increased, or more people at least were talking about it. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the things, right, with the big stigma around stress, around mental health, right? Because in our culture, it's pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That's a common thing we all were raised with. Mm-hmm. Like, you can do it, just work harder, just work more. And that becomes really difficult sometimes. And so let's talk a little bit about the different parts of the Farmer Wellness Program and give our audience some background into what's available to them out there, because I think sometimes I hear we're one of the best kept secrets at DATCP, and so we want to shout it from the rooftops. You know, here we are, here's what we do, here's how we can help any farmer or farm family member in Wisconsin and the programs we offer. And so let's talk about that. And I'll let you kick off with one of our largest programs underneath that umbrella, and that's our counseling voucher program.
Yeah, so the counseling voucher program, for those who don't know, and I agree, Karen, we should shout it from the rooftops. I make sure to mention this no matter where I go, no matter who I talk to, because we all know a farmer. And it's really important that everybody hears the resources available and the phone number and the website many, many times over, because sometimes it's just, as you said, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to ask for help. And the farmer wellness programs and the helpline has really been boosted by the voucher program. And basically what it will do for folks is you can contact the Farm Center if you're feeling stress, if you're feeling anxiety, and get connected to a mental health professional, sometimes who's physically near you, but most importantly, there's somebody who knows the world of agriculture. And that's really important, because when you're speaking the same language, there's that element of compassion that comes along with it, an acknowledgement, an understanding of what people are going through, because stressors for farmers is different than anybody else. And it's that program has been it's just a small investment in money, but it's an important investment in people to provide a farmer mental health voucher. And what we've seen as people become aware of the program is that the use of those vouchers has continued to go up. And it's important, because that means people know the resources there. But for us at DATCP and for those who are our partners, please continue to tell others about the resource. It's okay for people to make that call. They are not in it alone.
Right, you brought up some really good points. I was talking to a farmer yesterday, and I asked, how did you hear about us? And he said, a friend said, we think you need to call this number. And he did, and that's the biggest first step. I tell all the farmers that call me, it's my honor, right, that you reached out to trust me enough to let me connect you with one of our providers. And you talked about that, right? Our provider network that we have developed, they understand farming. A lot of them are farm kids themselves, and they've chosen this profession of counseling. So they get farmers, they understand rural culture, and I tell farmers, you're not going to have to explain to them why you had to cancel your appointment today because your hay crop was ready, or you had a cow go down. They understand. And you're not going to have to explain to them why you're back on the farm even though you really wanted to do something else, right?
Right.
They get it. So that's really important to know. One of the things I want to make sure people understand too that our providers know, which is really special, and I wish I could take credit for it, but I can't. Our providers really get that when a farmer calls us and when I send them to their way, they need to see them now. So on average, our counselors are getting our first time appointments 5 to 10 days. And when counseling in general, some people are waiting 5 to 6 months for their first appointment. 5 to 10 days is incredible, and I have to give all that to our counselors for making that happen. Farmer calls, they act, and they get in to talk to them right away.
It's really important to have that network that can be so responsive, because you never know when that stress is going to rise to that level. And when people can, number one, talk to somebody who understands their situation, but number two, talk to somebody quickly. It really is important to have that connection. And that network that's been built over time, it's continued to grow, has been really impressive and again, a great resource to farmers that are out there.
And I think, with all the leadership here at DATCP, letting us make it a priority I got that notification, a farmer called our 24/7 line, which that's another program we have available, is a 24/7 line, and it does just what it says. In the moment, anytime you need it, any day of the week, it's there for you. And the call came in from there to connect with additional resources, and I knew no matter what priority I had on my day, that callback was going to happen. I think I finally got a hold of the farmer after 4 p.m. and I said, before I leave today, you will have a list of options for you to look at to select a counselor, because that's how important it is to us that if they took the time to call, that we take the time to respond, and we do it very efficiently and effectively, quickly, because that's what they need.
And that's so important. Farming is not a 40-hour-a-week, 9-to-5 job. So there's going to be a time where you're out milking or you're in a tractor. It's a weekend and you're fixing something. That 24/7 component of the helpline is really important. It's available. It's free and confidential for those who don't know that. And that availability is an important thing for farmers to know about.
Absolutely. I'm going to give the number right now, and I'm going to repeat it at the end. So if you don't have something to write with, but I tell people, put it in your phone, because you don't know. Just what Randy said, you don't know when you're going to need it. And if it's in your phone and you can find it, or maybe it's for a friend and you're like, oh, I have that number. So the number is 888-901-2558. And again, it's free, confidential, available any day, any hour. But we'll repeat that number again later. But keep that number handy, because you just never know. And now we're going to move over and talk about a program that, to be honest with you, Randy, when I joined here nearly 5 years ago, I was like, I don't know that that's going to work. I didn't have the vision for it yet. And now I have the vision and incredibly passionate about online support groups, right? I'm thinking farmers are really going to talk to each other?
Well, I'm glad you had the energy and the vision and the energy to imagine where this was going to go, Karen. So again, I really appreciate your efforts here. And I thought about it the first time you talked to me about it, and it's a different way for farmers to talk to each other, right? It's instead of I ran into you at the co-op, or I stopped in for a cup of coffee and I saw a couple people I knew. it's a different way of people connecting, and it can be in the time that works for them. So I know you work with those groups a little bit. Tell me a little bit more about that, or tell people who are listening a little bit more about what that's like and how it's progressed.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity. Like you said, it's a way for people to connect. It might not be their neighbor, which that can be nice if it's not your neighbor that you're sharing your stresses with. And so they happen depending on the growing season. We don't offer it as much because farmers are still out in the fields later in the day. They always happen on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. at night. There is a licensed clinical social worker on the call, and also peer leaders, which I think is the key, because these are farmers that are trained to lead these conversations. And so our original group, I like to think I'm hip sometimes. I call them the OGs. So our original group, they have been so strong. They welcome new people. They have just been an incredible support to each other and to anyone that comes into a meeting. And that group is more loose. They talk about whatever's on their mind that night. Sometimes they send stuff in ahead of time, but they just have conversation. It's a place to sit down, take a deep breath from your day, and talk to people that understand. And then in November of 2024, our groups were becoming so popular, we added another one, and we call this Rural Relations. And they wanted to talk about a topic. So they talk about things like difficult conversations, working with family. This month they're talking about ambiguous loss, which to me, when I first heard about that, I had to be educated, like what does that mean? And that's the loss that we don't have a clear ending to. So maybe you had to sell some farmland, and yes, there was the end of the sale, but you're still farming, or you're still trying, and you don't understand maybe what that meant to your family. And so you're dealing with loss, but you can't wrap your arms around the grief of certain things. They talk about things like generational trauma, and I thought, well, what's that? And that's really interesting to think that when our ancestors came here from different countries, and they had to really dive in and build these businesses from the ground up, right? Acquire land, and some of the trauma that went along that, for my family, it was some of losing grandpa early, right? Through dying at a young age, because that was more common, right, for that older generation. And my father-in-law stepping in 8th grade to start taking control of some of the farm, and losing my father-in-law when he was only 67 to cancer. And some of that trauma that occurred in our farm over the years. And so these topics are really, really important. And I think it's a great way to connect, to learn about something new, learn about something we didn't know, but farmers connecting with farmers at the end of the day. And we've seen, like I said early on in the introduction, 50% growth in attendance.
That's pretty remarkable. And I can tell you, I don't know if I've told you this before, Karen, but since I mentioned the Farm Center and the resources that are available in the Farmer Wellness Program, wherever I go, no matter who I talk to, it's not unusual for people to come up to me afterwards and say, number one, thank you for mentioning that. And I've had some instances where people who are part of the online support groups have said, hey, we're part of this group, and we're really enthusiastic about it because it's farmers talking to farmers. As you said, it's just people speaking the same language and exploring some of these concepts that they all feel or they all experience, but they maybe haven't put into words, and they can put it into words with people who are willing to be listeners and share and just be a resource to each other.
Exactly. So definitely, if you're out there listening and you want to join in, we tell people you can come in the first time and kind of even stay in the background and see if it's something that might be a good fit for you. And we'll share the number for the Farm Center at the end here, or just go out there and find our website. We have great information out there on the Wisconsin Farm Center through DATCP, and you can gather all of this information. But all these programs, as we talk, they take a little funding to make happen, right? Let's talk a little bit about, our listeners may or may not know, this program is not permanently funded. It was funded originally in 2019 in that biennium budget with $100,000 per year, and we've continually received that funding for every budget after that. But if you can talk a little bit about that and about the support that's needed from our governor, from our state legislature to make that happen.
It is important to inform people about the resources that are available. And you're right, it started because Governor Evers as a foundation wanted to invest in programs that support people with their mental health and wellness across the board. And this particular program built off of the foundation of the Farm Center. As we talked earlier, it developed in the mid-'80s. Wellness has been part of it, but the farmer mental health component was something that fit into the governor's vision for providing these resources to people that are in a really important profession that not a lot of people understand. And that's the start, but this is the investment that gets proposed. I think people being able to kind of help us tell the story of how important this is also important for legislators to hear, because the governor proposed it and the legislature agreed with it, and that's what's happened ever since it first got put into the budget. But while what the Farm Center does is free and confidential, it's important for us to tell generic stories, not about individual people. So, for those who are listening, that it's just we tell the story of the program and the kinds of resources that it provides, the kind of programming it offers, but we don't tell a story about individuals. So a lot of times we're relying upon data and the growth of the program over time. The kinds of programs that are seeing the most growth, because you talked about the online support group and their rapid growth and the number of counseling vouchers. As people become more aware of the type of services that are available here with the Farm Center and the Farmer Wellness Program, it kind of helps to tell its own story. And that's really important because we as an agency go back to those policymakers, the governor, the legislature, and say this is an important program. It's a foundational program. It's investing in people. It's investing in farmers. Look at all the program growth that's occurred here. We need to continue to provide those resources, and also look at what other types of programming might be necessary. You talked about the online support network and how that was envisioned and then evolved. Those are the kinds of things that hopefully we as an agency can continue to do, and I know, Karen, you as a program implementer are always thinking that way. We need to look towards the future too, to say this is a foundational investment, let's keep making it, but what other kinds of services are needed out there? And that's the evolution and growth of programs that make a really big difference in people's lives.
Well, thank you. And, I want this audience to know that without your constant support and advocacy for this program, it wouldn't be where it is today. Just talking to our farmers, because you reach a lot of farmers, but also talking to the governor, to the state legislator, having a seat at that table to make sure they understand. Although it's, when we look at the state budget as a whole, it's a little tiny piece, but it is a piece that's making a difference. And so thank you for that. And
thanks for your kind words.
And I want to make sure everybody out there knows that you have been a true champion of the Farmer Wellness Program. And I hope, Randy, if a farmer or farm family member is out in their barn or in their tractor right now listening to this, maybe not hopeful for spring as we move into spring and summer and the growing season, because they're facing some stressor, some hard time out there. What do you want them to hear?
Well, I think we touched on it a little bit earlier, and that is, even in the best of times, farming is a stressful business. There are things beyond a farmer's control, weather, pricing, things of that nature, and then you add in some of these other things that that are unforeseen, like volatility in markets and not having access to certain international markets, that all plays a role in the financial impact to farmers. And what we hope people will take away is that as you experience the challenges that are out there, realize that there are resources that are out there for you to call if you have anxiety, if you're feeling anxious, if you're battling depression. There are programs out there, there are people out there that can help and get you to a better place. And taking that step of making the call, it's a big step. I understand. I've talked to people who have done that, and they say it's really important that they address that barrier themselves and then made the call. We want people to know the phone number, have it in their phones, as you said, Karen, and just realize that 24/7, if you need to talk to somebody, there's somebody there to talk to you. It's okay to make that call.
Right, thank you. It's so important, and can't say enough about all your ongoing work in supporting farmers, farmer mental health. You've made a difference, and just like you said earlier, it's okay not to be okay. I know we are stoic people, we're strong, we can fix everything, but sometimes we can't fix ourselves, and we do need to talk to someone. And I haven't had one single farmer call me back and say it was a really bad idea to reach out for help. They all feel a sense of relief that they took that step, and that hard first step. So I want to repeat those numbers. Please remember, if you need to talk to someone, our 24/7 helpline is 888-901-2558. Or you can reach our Wisconsin Farm Center team, and we're at 1-800-942-2474. And I hope you've enjoyed and learned something in this conversation, but tune in every week in May for new episodes. We're going to be talking about permission to pause. Interesting thought, right? One of the biggest things and ways farmers cope with stress is overwork. So we're going to be talking about giving ourselves a little permission to take a pause. Also going to talk about talking to your kids about hard seasons. Because as a mom, I know my kids know when I'm not doing okay. They're pretty intuitive, so it's going to be important that we share some information about talking to your kids, and it's okay to share. Guess what? A lot of our farm work is done at the kitchen table, and they hear that, and they know. They're smart. Our kids are smart, and they know. So it's going to be important to talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit about that never-ending to-do list, because, Randy, we did some focus groups with the University of Wisconsin Extension when we kicked off this program, and the biggest stressor was time management.
Oh, I can imagine, yeah.
Right? So we're going to talk about that never-ending to-do list and maybe some tips and tricks. And then lastly, we're going to talk about, and you and I have already brought this one up, but when a farm neighbor is struggling, what to do when you don't know what to do. So give a few tips. All these episodes are pretty short, 10 minutes, just to give people some tips, some things to think about. And how to help themselves and help their neighbors. So as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with one thought. Here in Wisconsin, we take care of our land, we take care of our animals, and we take care of our neighbors. So let's make sure we take care of ourselves.
That's a great way to put it. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
The Wisconsin Farm Center with the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection provides a variety of services to farmers and farm families across Wisconsin, including financial consulting, transition planning, conflict mediation, veterinary diagnostic analysis, a farmer wellness program, and more. For additional info, you can call the Wisconsin Farm Center toll-free at 1-800-942-2474 or email them farmcenter@wisconsin.gov. Also, the website address is datcp.wi.gov. Also, if you're experiencing depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, or just need a welcoming ear to talk to, call the free and confidential 24/7 Wisconsin Farmer Wellness Helpline at 888-901-2558 to talk with a stress counselor anytime. Until next time, thank you for listening to the Rural Realities Podcast.